Have you ever heard of human design? Are you curious about psychedelics? Then this is the episode for you. So I am here with Diamond Drip. I don't know if that's on her birth certificate or not, but I'm really excited to meet you and to start this conversation. And I'd like you to give our audience an idea of who you are. So who are you? What do you do? Why are you passionate about it? And can you do that in 90 seconds or one breath?
I love that. So I first want to say Diamond Drip is not on my birth certificate. Diamond is, but not Diamond Drip. That is all branding. And so that's one of the things that I get to help people do is build these amazing brands where they actually stand out from the crowd. And so what I get to do is I get to really dive deep into people and look at the way their energy flows. Look at the areas in their life where they've been exposed to some conditioning. They've maybe learned some stories about themselves that aren't necessarily true. And I help them unlearn what those things are so they can step into the true, authentic power of who they are and build a beautiful, authentic online brand that supports that.
I love that. And you do so many other things as well. You're like me, you're a multi-passionate, you're a multi-hyphenate. So I think this will be a really fun conversation. And for those of you who are listening as you're driving, you don't get to see the really cool background that Diamond has of just some psychedelic looking mushrooms, which we're going to talk about. But let's talk about something you just started off with. You said you help with branding, etc. So you do visual communications, but you also work on things like human design and gene keys. And for the people who have no idea what that is, how did you get there? What got you there? And what is human design in simple terms?
Absolutely. So, how I got here was through my own personal and professional journey. It was after the trial, I was trying to figure out how to integrate these parts of my higher consciousness into my everyday life. And then, business wise, I was in a business coaching program that talked all about the proven methods and frameworks that will help you create 10K, have $100,000 launches, all the things that we hear about. And I was doing all the things, but I wasn't having the success as some of the other people. And so that made me feel like, what's wrong with me? And it really made me hunker down and try and figure out, okay, well, what's my superpower? And it was a culmination of both of those things that came together in one question, which was, do you know your energy type? I was talking with an intuitive life coach. And she was like, well, it sounds a lot like do you know your energy type? And I was like, no. She sent me a calculator and immediately my one line kicked in human design. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the one line is the investigator, the researcher. And so there's rarely a rabbit hole that doesn't excite me that I don't dive deep into.
I'm the same way.
And so human design was no different from the very first videos that I pulled up. What does it mean to be a generator in human design? What does it mean to have emotional authority? It just felt like I was coming home to myself. And so while I was already in the business and mindset coaching space, this just added that extra layer. And I was actually having a connect and chat with somebody, and she was like, any tool that we can use to help us get past some of the things that people will usually try and hide and kind of sugarcoat that keep us from really breaking through to that next level. Human design, it gives insight into some of those areas. It's a owner's manual, I like to call it, for this vessel in this incarnation in this lifetime. And it gives you an idea of the gifts that your soul chose to be successful in this lifetime. It gives insights into how the universe brings you opportunities for you to touch in and check in with your intuition and see what's aligned for you.
I love that. Now, I'm a lawyer. And when you said after the trial, I know what you're talking about with trial, but some people think, is she a murderer? What happened with the trial? Right? So we're going to talk about your clinical trial in a few minutes, but I just want to make sure that people are sitting thinking, but wait a minute, was she going to talk about the trial? So let's talk a little bit let's go a little bit deeper into this human design, right? So you said you took a test, and I did the same thing. So one of the things, we are going to provide a link in the show notes to your website. You can go on and for free, which is very generous of you. I pulled my type. So I am a manifesting generator. What does that mean? I like the word manifesting, right? I like the word generator. What does that mean? And what does that mean in terms of how my life should work? Because I've done lots of assessments, and I'm a coach as well. So I administer assessments, DISC, Clifton Strengths, Hogan, lots of other things. I've done Colby, Wealth Dynamics, so many different things. Every single time I do that, I learn something more about myself. I think if you don't do assessments, you really can't know who you are, why you respond to things, why you like to get things done quickly or not so quickly. It's just a wealth of information, and any person should do this. So let's talk about how human design is different and what does it mean for me, for example, as a manifesting generator.
Absolutely. And obviously, you can't see this, but my daughter is off to the side. She's 7, just leaping for joy because you said manifesting generator. I'm a generator. She's a manifesting generator. So her soul is just ignited right now. But where human design differs from things like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or Clifton Strengths is that all of those questionnaires, they take a look at a snapshot of the person after they've already been exposed to conditioning and trauma and all of these things that show up in our everyday life as human beings on this planet. And so what can happen, because I took DISC, what can happen with DISC is you see the areas where you're really strong and you see the areas where you're, not so strong, and you can make goals and strategies and things like that. And you can take the test again in 6 months and it will have changed. You will have moved the needle in some of those areas. Where human design is different is that it's the science of individuation. And so your actual blueprint that you were born into, that your soul chose gifts for, it doesn't change. There are things that can be activated for certain periods of time because astrology and astronomy are some of the sciences that go into human design.
I was
But
actually going to ask you about that. How does it work with astrology? All right, good.
yeah, exactly. So your chart doesn't change, but you do get temporary access to some of these gifts, to some of these gates in your design based on where the planets are as they move and shake and shift up there. And so to answer your second question, which was, so what does it mean to be a manifesting generator? And so manifesting generators are a hybrid energy type. There are 4 main energy types. And so manifesting generators are a hybrid of manifester and generator. And essentially what that means is that you have, and this is going to be like terminology because I haven't figured out the more human way to say this, but you have a motor connection to your throat in terms of the way your energy flows, which means that you can bring things into form a lot quicker than generators, which are the non-hybrid energy. And so what that means is that you have this beautiful ability to multitask, to be multi-passionate, to shorten time for things. So manifestors, they are here to initiate, to catalyze, to really get things started. And generators are here to master things that light them up, that are brought to them to be in response to. And so as a manifesting generator, so society is going to tell you pick one thing and stick to it. And that's actually really not aligned for you. If you only stuck to one thing, you would actually be really bored because you have this gift of efficiency. Whereas generators, we're very step by step and methodical, and we like to follow a certain path. You'll look at a generator's step by step and you're like, steps 2 and 3 are really suggestions. I think we can just go straight to step 5 and 6 and we'll still get the same end result. And so because you have that gift of efficiency, you can have your hand in all of these multiple different buckets.
So that's helpful to know, and it explains a lot. So for some people who are listening, and we do want them to pull the blueprint off your chart, but we talked a little bit about the generator, but let's give a little bit more fleshed out about the generator and then the other types, just so people can have an idea. Because I want people to sit there and think, this might help. Because part of the reason I administer so many different assessments is because they all serve different purposes. And the more you know about yourself, the more productive you're going to be, the more happy you're going to be. A lot of times when I give people assessments, they'll say, oh my gosh, this is why I hate my job. I said, yes, because you're not doing what you're meant to do, right? And so when you know what you're meant to do, you're going to do better at it. Or at least you have the goal to say, now I know I am miserable. It is me. I'm in the wrong place and I'm not using my gifts. I'm not using what my soul called me to be here for. So what can I do differently? So let's just go briefly through those other types, and then we're going to get to your trial.
Yes. So I love that you asked that question because there really are a few main components that you're going to look at when you look at your design. It's your energy type and your strategy, which those go hand in hand. And we're about to dive into the energy types. Then you have your authority, which is how your intuition speaks to you. And then you have your profile, which is how your energy, how your aura shows up in this movie that we call life. And so the manifester energy type, as I said, they are here to initiate. And so they are one of the only energy types that can actually just bring things into form. And so their strategy in life is to actually inform the people who are going to be affected by their decisions so that they can have less resistance as they bring things into form. Just giving people a heads up who might be impacted can serve them a really long way. Then you have your generator energy types. And so we are here to be in response to life. So as a manifesting generator and a generator, we have a defined sacral center. And so how our sacral speaks to us is through these body wisdom, or like I have the energy for this or I don't. And so if you don't have emotional authority as a generator, it stops there, which you are an emotional generator. So at a minimum, we have to sleep on things before we take action on them. And then you have the projectors. And so these are our guides. They have a very penetrating aura, so they can see the gifts of other people, which is why their strategy is to be recognized for the wisdom that they have to share in order to share it with the right people who are aligned for them. And then you have the rarest energy type, which are reflectors. They make up less than 1% of the population. And I always give them so much love whenever I find them in a crowd of people, because I know that it's not easy being a reflector. They take in so much energy from their environment, and it takes them a while to really come to their authentic truth. As a matter of fact, their strategy is to wait a whole lunar cycle when it comes to the really big decisions, friendships, relationships, if you're about to move, career. And so I feel for them, because we live in a society that's like, do this now, strike while the iron's hot,
Right,
buy
right.
now. And they're like, but this doesn't feel right. I don't have all of the information I need. So those are that's just a brief overview of the different types. And then based on those other elements, your profile, your authority, that kind of determines how you make your best decisions.
Awesome. So there's another thing that you talk about, which is called gene keys. Is that related to human design, or is it something completely different?
No. So human design is a synthesis of a bunch of different sciences. Like I said, astrology, astronomy, the Chinese I Ching, quantum physics, the chakra model, Kabbalah tree of life, to name a few, right? It's a bunch of different sciences.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gene Keys takes a look, like a really deep look at two of those: quantum physics, as well. Well, I guess three: quantum physics, biology, biogenetics, and then the Chinese I Ching. And so every gate in human design actually is a gene key as well. But gene
Okay.
keys looks at the different frequencies in which we show up. And so every key has these three frequencies, where the shadow is this challenge that you have to surmount in order to gain the wisdom and the creativity to live in the gift frequency. And then when you have this transcendent soul level realization of this gift, that's what we call the siddhi, which is a Sanskrit word, Siddhi. And so that's when things are super aligned and really clicking, and you know that you're moving towards your path. And so I love gene keys as a additional tool to human design, because when you first begin the human design experiment, is what it's called, because we're going against society and
Yeah.
choosing to listen to ourselves over outside noise. When you first begin the experiment, it is kind of like this practical tool of like, okay, how does this sound to me? How does this feel like? And then bringing your brain evidence of when you follow your intuition,
Mm-hmm.
things work out, or when you don't and you ignore
Right.
it, things go that way. And so it's this beautiful experiment of gathering evidence. But when you start unpacking the gene keys, that's where you really get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, these are the patterns that I've been stuck in for years. And if I can just transform these shadows into gifts, I will be able to go so much farther longer because I have these insights of how I can stay out of the shadow.
Awesome. So you talked about it a couple of seconds ago, and intentionally, people are going to be skeptical. They're going to say, "What is this?" Now you're talking about astrology and a gate and a key. What does this mean? Um, how do you address the skeptics who say, "I think this is just a bunch of BS"?
Yes. So there are skeptics. And honestly, the thing that I say to them is to pull their energy to see how some of the things land in their body. Get out of their head, because there are specific gates actually around confusion, and there's a gate of doubt, which
Mhm.
in the shadow frequency can be this unhealthy skepticism about everything.
Right.
I know a few people in my life with that gate. We're
I
working
don't
on
know any
getting them
people
out
like
of
that. I
this.
mean, I only know lawyers. I'm just kidding.
um, but what I say to them is just to get out of their head and see how it feels in their body. Usually, those people I find they're not so open at first, but
Hmm.
then they with that awareness of what's happening at a minimum of their inner authority, they start to notice areas where they begin to feel resistance when they don't listen to it. Because once you
Right.
learn this language, once you learn learn about these tools, I don't know, there's something that happens. There's this
Yeah.
shift that starts to happen, and your body's like, oh my gosh, like, yes, this is the thing. When that doesn't happen, right? Because that's a whole situation. When that doesn't happen and they don't try it, I just honestly, I leave it. There was a time where I was very much, especially when I first found out about these tools, I was in that convincing energy of like, no, try it. Like,
Right.
see, like, but what I've come to realize, especially because there are parts of your human design that tell you who you're designed to be around and who you're designed
Yes.
to see in your environment. I'm like, I'm not for everyone. And so why exert all of this energy and effort trying to convince somebody of something that's good for them when there are people who are excited to dive deep into these tools?
Absolutely. And I think people are definitely, I mean, I'm hearing more and more people talk about, I'm a manifesting generator. Like, it used to be, I'm a Scorpio, and now, now they've got something else, right?
Yeah,
And, when the teacher is ready, the student's ready, the teacher will appear, as they say, right? When people are ready for it, then it all makes sense. And I've just always found that the more you know about yourself, the less likely you are to listen to outside voices. And sometimes it's not that people are learning, it's they're remembering. They're remembering who their true self is. It's saying, this is who I am. And I haven't been myself for so long because I'm trying to compete with whatever's out on social media or what people expect from me at work or my family expects. And so when they finally say, okay, I'm not the crazy one in my family. This is why I'm different, or this is why I go down these rabbit holes, whereas other people saying, why are you spending 6 hours on that? So I think that is always helpful because once we know ourselves, we can get more comfortable and we can get past those limitations that we put that I can't do this, whereas I actually could do this, but I'm not going to do it well because I don't love it. But now that I know what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm going to excel at that. So I want to switch gears for a minute. I'm a huge advocate of mental health and well-being. For anybody who listens to the podcast, they know. And you actually participated, or we get into the trial, you participated in a clinical trial because you had some mental health issues that you've been very public about, which I think is really important. You're a woman, and for people who can't see you, you're a Black woman. And I think it is important that we are comfortable talking about our struggles, and more importantly, what some alternative therapies can be. So, first of all, you're not a medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. Nothing you say is medical advice. Talk to any medical practitioner. We got that out of the way. Now, tell us, what was this clinical trial about? Why did you go? And how did it change your life?
absolutely. So the clinical trial looked at the efficacy of psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms, and its effect on treatment resistant depression and bipolar 2 individuals, which that's a lot. So, the reason why I participated in the trial at its core essence was because I knew I know how much this medicine can help people. especially people of color who are dealing with generational trauma and all of these different things and stories that we need to unpack. And there just weren't enough people talking about the benefits of what it can do for them. So originally, I was at the gym working out, and I was looking at a Red Table Talk episode with Jada
Hmm.
Pinkett Smith, and they had Michael Pollan on, who is the author of it's a very long title, but How to Change Your Mind, What the Science
Right.
of Psychedelics Teaches
Hmm.
Us. It's a very long title. You search just that in Michael Pollan, and it'll come up.
Hmm.
And so essentially, the grandmother, Jada Pinkett's mom, asked, why don't we see more African Americans talking about all of these great benefits? And essentially, one of the things that was said was, one, not a lot of people feel safe, because it's even hard to feel safe in your own home when people are, homes are being busted into and people
Yeah.
are being killed in their own homes. And then also, like I said, they don't see enough people who look like them talking about what it can do. And so, towards the end of the episode, they're always trying to end with, well, what can we do? And so there were really two pathways that I was able to do. One was to go through a MAPS certification for being a guide for psychedelics.
Hmm.
It was thousands of dollars. I don't remember how much right now. It's probably gone up since then. But there was no guarantee that after you finish this guide certification, that there would be this list of clients waiting for you to guide them through these experiences. Then the other path was a clinical trial, because one of the things about things like cannabis and psilocybin psychedelics is that these are still Schedule 1 substances in the United States, which one of the criteria is that they have no medical benefit. So obviously, if we do more trials that prove they have medical benefit, that can help with the descheduling, so that that can not be a thing. And so I was
And
like,
for
well,
people who have no perspective, Schedule One is also heroin, right? So just so that
yes,
you know that, and
yes,
so when people are looking and they're saying let's decriminalize or let's marijuana, there's part of a reason, and obviously marijuana and mushrooms have proven effects. They've been testing them for years and years, and so I just want to give people kind of some context of it's not the same as heroin, all right, and it shouldn't be
right? Or
classified the
meth.
same way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, or meth or any of those
Right.
other things. I love that. You brought that piece in. And so I was like, well, I'll try my luck with this clinical trial, because I hear about them. I feel like, I'd be a good fit. And I looked and I saw that they were looking for someone for my exact diagnosis. I went to clinicaltrials.gov. That's where I went to go look. It's where you can go look. You can search your exact diagnosis and whatever type of trial you want to participate in. And I was one of the last participants to get in, which was like so kismet.
Mhm.
And I always say that that trial taught me everything that I was doing wrong in the recreational setting, because it taught me the importance of set and setting, and going in with intentions and integration afterwards. And I I historically say that that trial healed my depression, because it opened my eyes to something that was more than me, and it also helped me gain some self-compassion and some self-forgiveness that allowed me to stop holding myself back in these ways that I had learned to hold myself back.
Right. How long did this trial last?
Yeah, it was 15 weeks.
So basically, are you doing mushrooms every day? How does that
Oh
work?
no. So yeah,
Can you
so
work? Can you function? Like what?
The 15 weeks, majority of it is preparing for the dosing day and then integration afterwards. So the actual dosing day experience is about 3 days. You go in the day before, you take your final drug test because they don't want you on anything mind altering. You get to see the room, you get to try on the headphones, the sleep shade, everything, so that when you go in the next day, it's not this total new surrounding.
Mhm.
You also meet your co-pilot. So in case the therapist that you've been kind of setting goals and intentions with has to go to the bathroom, there's not a complete stranger in the room with you if you are to come out. And so that's really what, day one of the 3 day dosing is all about. Day two, they administer in the morning. It was in the morning for me. These 5 teeny tiny capsules where they were able to extract the psilocybin out of the mushroom and put it in these capsules. And then you're there for 8 hours because, it's normally 4 to 6 hours for you to go through the experience. And because it's a clinical trial, they have to make sure that safety is a thing. And then you go back on day 3 and you start unpacking, you start integration. So there's just one dosing day, and then the rest is integration afterwards. There are different trials that do it differently.
Okay. So for people who've never tried mushrooms, and of course everybody's experience will be different, right? Can you give some generalized, and you did it again in the safety of a clinical trial run by the government, right? And other people, they're like, oh, I'm going to go do some shrooms, right? So there's a whole different kind of way to think about it. So some people who are listening will say, I've always been curious, what does it feel like? So without, of course you can't generalize, but what did it feel like when you did the mushrooms? And had you done psilocybin before?
Yes. So I had experimented with microdosing psilocybin before. I had experimented not with the full hero dose of 5 grams or more, but I did, do like 3 grams. I think I might have even done 3.5 grams. And that's why I say that the trial taught me the things that I was doing wrong. Cause I would like get through a whole workday. And then I would, before I go to bed, I would take the mushrooms and I would have these beautiful experiences where I was able to connect in this connect to my emotions on this deep level. I was able to see music, to be able to have the synesthesia and all of which I learned through my partner. Not everyone sees things in like colors and all of that
Right.
stuff. I'm like, you didn't see. I'm like, what was going on in there then? Like you were just black and white the whole time. But I don't know what, like you said, everyone's experience is different. Each for each of the songs, because they have a playlist during the trial that you're listening to, I called them song journeys. And so for each of the song journey, it was like this story unfolding, and each story, each journey had a lesson or a nugget that I could take with me that I could then start integrating into my life. And that, so what I'll say is everyone's experience is different. That was my experience. I do have a playlist on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, that talks about the differences between recreation and clinical trial.
And
And if I had to,
what's the name of your YouTube channel for people that want to hear it?
Diamond Drips Discussions.
Diamond
And
Drift Discussions.
yes,
Okay.
and it's a playlist. It's What's the Deal with Magic Mushrooms is what you're looking for. But that I made at the time, like around the time of the trial. So that has all my freshest insights
Okay, because I
because
was like, your hair looks different. I've seen some of them, right?
yes, but that's going to be different. And I love that I did that playlist because it has brought opportunities like at Oxford University. They're looking at psilocybin and the long-term effects, and there was a radio article that was published about participating in trials and things like that. So I love that it's becoming more talked about because it
It's
really
just straight up
can.
mainstream. Like the Wall
Yeah,
Street Journal had an article
yeah.
about, professional women microdosing. So what is microdosing? And again, everybody, please speak to your medical professional before you do any of these. But what is microdosing and how is that different than what you called the hero's dose?
Yes. So microdosing is taking no more than zero point 0.3 grams. So having a scale that can measure that small, taking no more than zero point 0.3 just to get some of the benefits like enhanced concentration. You get a little boost to your energy. You lower the default mode network a little bit, which is where the ego is housed. And so it makes you more empathetic. It makes you more compassionate to those around you. Without losing reality, right? Losing connection to reality, which is what happens when you take a hero, or what I sometimes call the experience dose, which is 5 grams or more. That's when you full force, time is distorted, you're
It's
seeing
like an
color.
ayahuasca
Yeah,
journey,
yeah.
pretty much.
So
I did ayahuasca in Peru for 3 days a couple of years ago. So all over the place, all kind of stuff, but I remembered everything.
yes.
And is it the same when you do the hero's dose of the mushrooms?
Yeah, that from what I understand, ayahuasca does happen over a few days during some retreats.
Yeah.
Psilocybin it's really just the 4 to 6 hours. And there are some clinical trials that have been done where that's all people need. Like,
Yeah.
and they're good.
Hmm. Great. So microdosing, people do it every day.
Hmm.
The
Or
hero's
every
dose
other day.
every other day. Okay. And it helps you with sharpness, etc. Again, talk to your medical
Right.
professional. You've also talked about cannabis, and we started talking a little bit about marijuana. And you look at that as having medicinal value as well, as do many medical professionals. There's a reason that there's medical marijuana. There's a reason that, lots of veterans. I'm a medical marijuana patient for. I don't like to smoke, but for sleep and for pain. And every time I go there, there's discounts for veterans because to help with PTSD. So it's all there, but yet and still a Schedule One. Hopefully that'll change at some point. How is it different? And again, for people who might be thinking of this after they talk to a medical professional, um, where does that come in? Because for many mental health issues, marijuana is not helpful.
Hmm.
It's helpful for some, but for some, it can make it worse. So, where do you stand when it comes to
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. So I also have my medical marijuana card. I got it just after my daughter was born, and she is 7 now. And the trial, for context, it happened in 2022. So I had kind of known about mushrooms since like 2021, did some experimentation, and then the trial was 2022. And what I can say about the difference between the two of them is that when and I still use cannabis to help me sleep as well.
Hmm.
But what I found was that cannabis helped with the symptoms. So it helped with, some of the pain related to depression. It helped with helping me sleep because insomnia. With
Hmm.
my partner who has anxiety, it helped him calm his brain down enough to be present in social situations without that
Right.
constant overthinking. So I find that cannabis, it helps with the symptoms, but it never actually helped me feel better. This is different for other people, obviously, but
Hmm.
I found that it didn't help me feel better. The mushrooms, they actually went in and helped me pinpoint different areas, different stories that I was telling myself that weren't true and that were holding me back. And so it gave me like the confidence, it gave me the self forgiveness to know, like, okay, these are the things that I want to fix. And if, I fail or I mess up, like it's still that compassion and self forgiveness to keep going. And so I actually talked about this in one of those videos from the playlist. But when you actually look at the scientific structure of psilocybin and like
Hmm.
serotonin, they're
Hmm.
so similar. And so I
Yeah.
always call like antidepressants like sometimes man-made man-made
Yeah.
psilocybin because they're just trying to replicate what
Right.
nature does naturally. So that's really the difference, is that cannabis, it helped with the symptoms, but the mushrooms, they help with the root cause.
Excellent. Awesome. So if somebody is starting off like, all right, I don't know, that mushroom cannabis, that's a little too far. Um, if somebody wants to start though thinking about alternative therapies, maybe they don't want to be on medication all the time. Where would you suggest that they start?
I love that question. I don't talk about this one often because everything's usually human design and business, but the one thing, the one unbiased thing that I will say is check out the playlist and see, because there's a number of different playlists, and see how it lands in your body. You won't know until you're able to get out of your mind and the things that we've been conditioned to believe, and start listening to the wisdom. So I would say check out the playlist, get some information, inform yourself about the tools and about the remedies, and then see how it lands in your body. If you want to have a deeper discussion, as we've said many times, I am not a medical professional, but I
Mhm.
do have a reading that's called Is Plant Medicine Right for Me? Where a good portion of that time we're talking about, the mental, like depression, anxiety, things that you've battled. What have you tried? And then I can share my perspective on what's helped me. And then we can actually look at your energetic blueprint, because when we go against our design for so long, it actually shows up as dis-ease in our body.
Yes.
So we can look at your energy and actually see some of the conditioning and things. Like if you're not ready for plant medicine, these are some ways that you can start getting back into alignment.
So you talked a little bit about human design in business a couple of minutes ago. How do people use it for business purposes?
Oh, I love that. So many things. So one is decision making, right? So many things, but I'm not going to nerd out. So decision making is one of them. Understanding how your energy is different from someone else's helps with things like imposter syndrome and new shiny object syndrome. Because, like you were saying earlier, when you know yourself and you're able to recognize how your higher self and your intuition speaks to you, it becomes easy to X out the outside noise because it's like, no, that doesn't feel right in my body. I don't actually
Right.
want to do that. And you can choose with sovereignty and confidence to do something that's actually in alignment for you. I also alluded that based on your design, you can see the people that you're meant to be around in your environment and who you're designed to see that you can actually nourish with your solutions. When I first came into the experiment, I saw my open centers and undefined centers as problems. I was like, this is where all the conditioning is happening.
Right.
This is where I'm believing stuff that doesn't serve me, and I need to not do those things. And now I'm starting to see the wisdom because that energy, it comes in and it becomes amplified. But if I don't attach myself to the ideas of other people, to like things like that, then I'm able to recognize the beauty and just play in the
Yeah.
possibility, which that's what we should be doing as business owners, is like playing in the creative possibility and all of that and nourishing the people who are right for us with our solutions. And you can only do that if you're living in alignment with the way that you were designed. So there's so much that you can gain. A lot of it is in the personal development space, but there
Hmm.
are certain things that you can do, that you can look into in terms of communication, who your people are, etc. There's just even your environment, like of where you work best, like all
Hmm.
of that.
And you can, so for those who are listening, you can't see her face is all lighting up. She's like a kid at Christmas that just got a new puppy because she gets, and I think that's important, right? Because I know when I talk about teaching or doing other kind of stuff, my face, I get so excited, right? Because when you know that you're doing what you're supposed to do, you are on a completely different level. You tend to be less bothered by certain things. And you can sit there and work 18 hours, not like you'd want to, but it's not, you're not even going to think about it because, like you said, I don't want to nerd out. We could probably have this conversation for 6 hours and people will long have hung up and stopped listening, and you could keep going because you're doing what you're supposed to do, right? And so few people get that chance. I often ask people if they have a job, a career, or a calling, and you can see the person who have a calling and who's actually living in their calling. And sometimes, like I said, you need assessments like this, or talk to people like you so they can say, "This is what I'm meant to do. And I don't need to be afraid of it anymore. I'm
Yeah,
not going to be limited by what people tell me I'm supposed to do." Right? Because you're the only person who has to live with that decision. Right? People could tell you stuff, but they're not living with it. And when you're living, like you said, constricted, where you feel like you're not who you're supposed to be, that is a horrible feeling. And I think that's how many, many people live their lives every day.
it is. And there's that book by Bronnie Ware, and the number one regret that people had on their deathbed was not living a life as they wanted to, but living a life as people expected them to. So
Absolutely.
that was their number one.
Absolutely. So I'm going to switch gears again. I know you sold knives as your first job in high school. I also sold knives in high school. Um, and so, what lesson did your first job teach you? And how do you use that lesson to this day?
Ooh, oh man. That's funny that we both did that. So what that taught me honestly was how I didn't want to sell. I think that being my first job, it instilled a lot of conditioning that, there are some things that I'm still letting go of. But the connection piece is so real. And so there was an element of connection because we were reaching out to our family and friends, but it wasn't like I was reaching out with something that was good for them. Like, yes, if you really needed to cut a watermelon and like I just so happened to have these awesome knives with this lifetime warranty, like then it's kismet. But for
Right.
most people, they're not like, Knives. I could really use a new set of knives. And so that lesson taught me just how I didn't want to engage with people. Like if I'm checking on
Right.
people, if I'm creating relationships, then it's because I have something that I full heartedly believe in, and I've seen like the personal growth and things that can happen from it. And I genuinely want those things for other people. I didn't even buy knives. Like I didn't even buy my own knives. Like I think that's one of the lessons is like if you aren't even willing to support the thing that you're doing, then it's probably time to take a deeper look at it or change perspective or something because I'm like there's rarely a person that I meet and human design doesn't come up like that. Like so I think that's one of the biggest lessons is you have to believe in what it is that you're talking to people about, that you're trying to invite people into.
Awesome. I love it. So I want you to imagine you had the chance to put together the ideal dinner party of maybe four people, living or dead. It doesn't matter if they like each other or not. Who would you want to have at that dinner table?
Yes. So Neville Goddard,
Oh, I love Neville Goddard. Huge
same.
fan.
Karen Curry Parker.
Mm-hmm.
I would do Oprah
Mm-hmm.
and oh, the fourth one. OMG. I would have to say it slipped me. Oh no, my brain. I'd have to say Simon Sinek. Yeah.
Okay. That's a really interesting group of people. So, for people who may not be familiar with anybody other than Oprah on that list, how did you pick that?
Yes. So Neville Goddard I picked because he has written many books. Let's start there. But one of the books that he's written is The Power of Imagination. And it talks about the power of imagination and the power of awareness. And so it talks about like this I am, but on a soul level. And from what I remember, he wrote these books in like the early 1900s,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
like 19, like, so he was so far beyond his time where everyone was focused on like the industrial revolution and getting jobs. And he's like, no, actually, we are these cosmic powerful beings. And if we just do these things, things will come in a line. And people are like, what are you talking about? So he's on the list because in a lot of ways, he was where I am. Luckily, we're going into this great awakening where more
Mm-hmm.
people are becoming open, but
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, people are still asleep, and it sometimes feels like I'm just like talking, but it's not clicking. So,
And for the listeners, you'd be surprised how many business coaches that you listen to, that you watch on YouTube, will sit there and mention Neville Goddard. Right? A lot of people have been inspired by him, and it used to be kind of more like this metaphysical community. But now you're finding, some very prominent people with very, very high YouTube counts and who are talking about how do you make $1 million, but they're going deep into kind of that. So I recommend Neville Goddard works for anybody. I mean, there's some, and his work evolved over time, right? So start at the beginning, so you don't freak out toward the end, right? So, all right,
yeah.
who was your second person and why?
I think the second person I said was Oprah, which many people know,
Yeah.
but one of the reasons why she is on my list is probably not for the reasons that other people. One of the things that Oprah has, I have a completely open throat in human design, and she has an undefined throat. And she has been able to use her voice to meet audiences where they are, like audiences and guests. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just something that, because I'm so new to this experiment and I'm trying to really hone, like I'm one of those people who well, not so much now, but I'll try and plan every single thing that I'm going to say because I'm afraid that I'm going to say the wrong thing because I don't have that consistent access to my voice through definition there. And so Oprah just does it so effortlessly and just so gracefully. And I'm like, I could use a few tips on that for sure. The third person that was on the list was Karen Curry Parker. And she is the person who um, she is involved with quantum human design. So a lot of what we've been talking about is traditional human design, which came through in Ra Uruhu's initial download back in the 80s.
Hmm.
But he passed away before he was able to really create some empowering and quantum physics centered language with these tools about how it lands in the body, how it shows up in the body, how we can be these creative beings as emotionals and things like that. And so that's what she did. She studied under him for years. And then she did her PhD research, and she did all the things to create this quantum human design. And so as a woman who's using these tools and she's made a name for herself, obviously tips and
Hmm.
insights to learn from there. Because I know she got a few looks throughout her beginnings.
Hmm.
And then the last person is Simon Sinek, and so
Hmm.
he is very much known in the corporate leadership space. He talks a lot about mindful leadership, authentic leadership, and really focusing on the person and not the result. And so I found him at a time where sales. Had a bunch of stuff that I was told about sales, and he was the first person or one of the first people who talked about sales in this way that didn't feel icky.
Right.
And I was like, that's the one part of being a business owner that I didn't want to do. It's like, I don't want to feel icky selling things to people. I know that you have to sell things to people because it's a business. There's a transaction that needs to happen, but I don't want to feel icky about it. And he talked about ways that you can show up in customer service and really being focused on the outcome, the transformation that you're getting your client, and letting that be the guide. And I was like, that's
Hmm.
something I can get on board with, Simon.
That's awesome. So, how can people work with you if they want to reach out to you? And who are you typically working with? Who is your ideal customer?
Absolutely. So the people that I typically work with are women. Usually they're diverse women, and they are still menstruating. I say that because that's important. We talk about, in addition to human design, we talk about how your menstrual cycles actually impact your energy and how you can work with your energy instead of
Hmm.
against it. So those people are usually my top go-tos. They're creating businesses and they want a new way to bring more of them into their business. And so you can message me on LinkedIn. The link is on my website. But honestly, the best way is pulling your chart, because that allows me to see your energy, see how it flows. And people who pull their chart, they actually get invited to workshops, because it's one thing to read it, but it's another thing to be in relationship, in workshop, in interactivity with this and seeing how it lands in your body.
Fantastic. So, we've covered a lot of things: human design, gene keys,
Mhm.
cannabis, mushrooms, clinical trials, so many different things. If people remembered nothing else, if you want them to remember one thing from this episode, what would that be?
If they remember nothing else, I want them to remember that they are limitless beings, and fear and self doubt keep us stuck, keep us held back from being those limitless beings. So these are tools that you can begin to use to remove those limitations.
Fantastic. So, thank you, Diamond Drip. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you share, like, subscribe, go over to Diamond's YouTube channel. We're going to have her links in the show notes as well. And thanks again, and thanks for joining in.